Welcome to MemoQ Talks, where we talk to industry leaders about their experiences, lessons learned, and what works best across all areas of localization. Now here's your host.
Gentlemen, how are you today?
Good.
Hey, Mark.
Not too bad. How are you, Mark?
Good. I got to be honest with you. Normally when we do MemoQ Talks, it's one guest. I've done a couple of episodes where we've had two guests, and I think one with the Vamos Juntos gang where we did 3 or even 4 guests. So this is going to be awesome because we've got 3 super experienced and highly qualified subject matter experts in tech and loc. And I'm going to encourage you guys to, don't wait for me. Just make it as interactive as possible. I want to, before we get started, just say, hey, I really enjoyed the conversation and discussion that you guys led at the last Seattle Localization User Group Slug meeting. The topic was something that everybody's talking about and everybody's concerned about, which is how technology is going to affect traditional jobs and roles in localization. And I want to jump into that ASAP. But before we do that, just to do a level set, can we go around the quote unquote room here, and maybe each one of you can just give the quick elevator pitch introduction in terms of your experience. I mean, you guys all have massive amounts of experience, but let's distill it down. Let's start with Alfredo.
Okay, Mark. Alfredo de Almeida. I'm originally from Brazil, from Rio. I've been working in localization for 31 years, actually. 30 of them, almost 30 of them at Microsoft. I recently retired, actually, from
Congratulations.
Microsoft. Thank you very much. And now I'm only involved in participation as an instructor at UW for the localization PM course that we do there from April to June. Yes, that's basically me in a nutshell.
Awesome. And obviously you're a fan of children and music. I'm guessing. I'm going out on a limb here. That's awesome, man. Agustin.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Agustin Da Fieno Delucchi. I'm originally from Peru. I've been in the localization industry for 27 years. And I started in Dublin, Ireland, like Alfredo and George. That's what we actually met. So I've been through many different roles, starting as a linguist, translator, anything that you would think in the localization industry. And these days I'm focusing more on AI and the impact that it has on our businesses.
Yeah, fun fact, the 3 of us met first in 1998, right?
9, when George arrived.
Yes, George arrived in 1999. So it's been a long time.
That's awesome. And you almost sound like an old couple. It was 97. No, it was 98. I'm sure it was 97.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm George. For the people that are curious, my name is pronounced George and not Jorge because I'm originally from Portugal. So I went to Ireland to work at Microsoft in 99. And I think the first weekend I went out for drinks with Agustin and Alfredo, and we've been friends and talking about localization ever since. I moved to Redmond to continue to work for Microsoft in 2003. Alfredo was already here. He arrived in 2000 and Agustin got here in 2006, and we kind of resumed our in-person talks, coffee, and things like that. I left Microsoft 2015, worked there as a localizer, software localization engineer, PM, and I've been kind of jumping around the industry, working as a localization PM, and still doing it, and teaching at UW with Agustin and Alfredo as well.
Awesome. So all combined together, you guys have something like, 80, 90 years worth of localization experience, and you've seen a lot. And really what I want to talk about primarily today is, what's AI and large language, what are large language models? How are they going to affect the industry, and what should we expect? But maybe let's take a step back because you guys have so much experience, and maybe can we look at some of the past technological disruptions or changes that each one of you have witnessed? And this time we'll go in reverse order. George, what stands out maybe as the first big disruptor that you noticed after you started your journey in localization?
Thanks for the question, Mark. I think what is really important, because our industry has had a lot of really seismic shifts, is to understand what's going to change and what's going to kind of remain the same. And right now, there's a lot of hype around generative AI, as we had in the past with translation memories or neural machine translation, saying, we can just take the human out of it. We can automate everything. And I don't think it's quite like that. I think that there still needs to be a human verification, and our processes still need to account for that. I think the biggest change that I saw, and like there are people that got into the industry before me and that saw other changes, was that when I started working in localization, I didn't really know what was localization. I thought localization was translation, and once I got more into it, I was like, oh, there's a few issues here around context and unique identifiers and all of that, and that's why we need localization engineers and software developers working on localization. But once we fix that, it's just going to be pure translation, and then the industry is going to stabilize into translation. That's not the case. What we've seen is that there's an explosion of content that keeps happening, and as much as we get a process almost optimal, then we change the file formats or we change content, and then we kind of have to go back to basics almost. And it's kind of a joke inside the industry, because people say, when I started, we were still localizing using Excel. And then a couple of hands will raise in the audience and they will say, oh, I'm still localizing with Excel, because it just happens that people have immediate needs and they don't really can set up a process that is optimal. So I would say what we are concerned right now with AI is to kind of understand what is going to change permanently and what is kind of just frost before it stabilizes into a more established process. But I'll pass it to Agustin, because Agustin has some really interesting charts about the explosion of content and the shift that it had that it has enabled.
Excellent. Thank you, George. That totally makes a lot of sense. Augustine, before you kind of respond to this second part of George's kind of handoff to you, I would like to go back and say, what big technological change specifically stands out in your mind as like, whoa, this was a big pivot for the industry or had a big impact? And the reason I'm asking this is because sometimes people think like this is the first time we faced this type of change. But I don't think it is. Maybe the size and the speed may be different, but we have had some pretty big seismic shifts in the past. What have you seen?
Right. Absolutely. So the first thing that I saw, it was obviously the internet, the ability to transfer files, because before we were even sending things through mail and packages to actually translate even manual text, or we were handling floppy disks or CD-ROMs for builds. So the first one was obviously the connectivity and the internet, and that was a big step in accelerating the business, right? Really, really accelerating it. Then we have the introduction of translation memories. That really helped us a lot in terms of leveraging and fuzzy matches and all that. So that was a major, major thing. And the next major thing was machine learning, machine translation. When we got it to reaching productivity levels, because there were many attempts before that until we have neural, we could really say, okay, now we can use it as a productivity measure. But you're right. It's the speed at which large language models are developing and generative AI. But I think is fundamentally a change into redefining what's possible. More than that. Before, we were always relying on a source. Okay. We were always, since even doing it with typewriters, we got a source usually in English and then translated it after the fact. The possibility now is that you can just create it on the fly for the specific language and market without having to have too much of a controlled English. Like it's been always the complaint from content creators. And that's actually redefining completely the model, because until now we have been optimizing a really fixed mindset and pipeline. There was start with the source and go and translate. Now, no, just generate it directly for whatever markets. It's much easier said than done, though.
Sure.
Okay, and I think that the future particularly for the translation professionals or language service professional is in when they need to act in this whole process, and what George was saying about the human in the loop. We need to make sure that those systems work really well. And it's not easy. You have to really make sure that you fine-tune your models, that you constantly evaluate them, that you constantly monitor them. For some areas, though, the sensitive areas, I don't see that, that we can just go straight into the generation of the content without, post-editing from humans. Let's just be clear here. Health services, anything that is really core to humanity should never be completely handed off to AI. But I think that the fundamental change I see is that before we were always relying on a source. Now we can even just rely on an idea, on a concept, and then make it available into any language or market.
Yeah, that is a quantum shift. So, you don't create content and then translate into 10 different languages from that source. You create in 10 different languages. That's mind blowing. Alfredo, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember something before translation memories, which is spell checking. Actually, I worked at a time where there were no really powerful spell checking. And when it was introduced at like 20 plus years ago, it made a huge difference in terms of productivity. I just wanted to add it to the mix. And to add to the AI and the transformation that's happening today is that, yes, there is now or pretty soon people will be using AI to generate content in any language. But that might not be the only way people will be operating in the industry. Some companies may decide to still generate content in English because they can guarantee, or in whatever language the company works on, because they can guarantee the quality. They have people that speak the language and then use AI to translate or to adapt that source into other language. So I do predict there will be different ways where how people will be using AI in this industry, at least in the foreseeable future.
It makes a lot of sense, both in terms of the examples of technology in the past that has changed. It's spell checking. I don't think I could survive a day without spell checking. I'm just too busy, just getting my emails and whatever out. And it's so nice. And I'm not even a professional linguist, but the people are doing thousands of words a day. Massive help. But I think about these changes in the past, the internet, translation memories, spell check, and more. And I'm wondering how much it really changed traditional localization roles. Obviously, the way that people in those roles would work might be different. A translator would work differently because they could use a translation memory. A project manager would work differently because they can send files via the internet, and you can do downloads and so on. But the actual role itself, the title of the role, maybe wouldn't change as much. What are you seeing in terms of, because, you've got a bunch of kids going to university right now or going to your courses at the UW trying to, to get that localization certificate. And they want to know, what job should I be preparing for? Is that the same job, the same role as today, or are they different? And I'm just going to put that out open. Whoever wants to jump in and answer that, please.
Sure. I can go. Okay. So I think one of the things that is not going to change is to have subject matter expertise and have knowledge of the local market. Yes, probably the titles will change. I think the location of where people are working on the projects might also change, because you might need to have someone that is hyper local and it is verifying what you're putting into the market, instead of having kind of a central product development team and have a multi-language vendor that is located in some headquarters and can then have some small vendors that are working locally. So I think your own product team is going to have people that are local, that are going to similar to what we used to call subsidiary PMs when I was working at Microsoft. So I think that that's likely to happen. And then I think one thing that I would advise, either if it's my own kids or someone else's that are coming into the market, is like really learn the fundamentals, because the fundamentals are likely to stay the same. And then the tools might change, the process might change, but if you understand the fundamentals, then you will be able to adapt. And also our industry is very diverse and people are at different levels of maturity. And I think, companies like Microsoft, where Agustin is working, are kind of at the forefront of what they can do and the power that they can bring into some of these changes. But there's a lot of, small companies, mom and pop, that they need to see where the industry is and then kind of match up to that. But I think as a professional, what you need to know is like understand where you are, understand where the industry is going, and kind of see how you can get there. Because if you are stuck in your place and say, I don't like where the industry is going, probably someone is going to push you out of the industry. So you have to have a really good idea and be able to articulate it either for your clients or for your management team, regardless of where you are in the industry, because everybody is now talking about generative AI and how that's going to affect localization.
How this is changing the industry, like specifically for people working in the industry? If you think in terms of translators, I'm not very optimistic that there'll be a lot of opportunities for translators, for people translating in the long term. Because as the quality evolves, the quality of the language generated by AI, and it's already, for some languages, it's depending on the context, depending on the type of application that we use, it's pretty acceptable. So I'm not very optimistic that there will be a lot of people with a lot of opportunities working as translators in the future. For PMs or for people managing the process, like their responsibilities will also change in terms of you will be using AI to help you drive these workflows. AI will be embedded as part of your job on everything you do. You will be focused on other things than what you have to focus today. But there is, I believe, at least in the foreseeable future, there will be a need to have people involved in managing projects. I believe there will be opportunities for people doing engineering, although what's very interesting with AI, it's an impact is not only in localization, but also in software engineering, is actually that they're getting very good at generating code, creating automation. So it might very well be that a lot of the work that you have to do yourself today, you will actually work with AI to get it accomplished. And one nice thing is that with AI, you will be able to accomplish things that in the past were very, very difficult to do. And I'll give you an example. The example that something that we were working on at Microsoft when I was still there. We'll be continue working on that space, which is, for instance, generating contextual information from software that you need to localize. So you have to localize the UI, and we've passed like decades bugging developers. And could you please create give some context, some comments, so that humans, translators, can actually localize your UI better. And it was always an uphill battle. It was always difficult to get, and the quality of the comments sometimes were not very good. There's a lot of noise. But now we can use AI to actually inspect the code, generate contextual information that is useful for the human translators today, but will also be useful for the agents, the AI agents that will be translating or validating the localized text in the future. And that's much easier to do with AI than it was, 3 years ago, 2 years ago. So there are a lot of a lot of cases like that, validation, testing, validating in real time, that in the past it required either a lot of money or resources to do that, then we might be able to create agents to enable that, to make that happen.
So I'm just going to make a counterpoint to what Alfredo said, because I don't think we're going to get rid of translators. I think their role is going to change. I think there are roles in the past that got extinguished, let's say a telephone operator where you were kind of just connecting calls. But I think for translators, it's going to be kind of moving from being a secretary to being a executive assistant. Like a secretary might not be typing up notes right now, because like you can use AI to kind of just get meeting notes and things like that. But there is still a role for an executive assistant that kind of facilitates the role of an executive. And I think a translator is going to become more of a linguist, where they might not spend the whole day, translating like we used to do, and kind of working on variations of the same sentence and things like that, which could be very boring, but kind of going to the finer details of like adjusting the language, adjusting the features to a certain market. But I actually think that there's going to be more linguists working in the industry than we have right now. But
yeah, no, I think that what I was saying is probably you both are right from the perspective of I think that for LSPs, going forward, translating software is going to become value added. It's going to be something that you probably wouldn't even, put it in the cost, meaning that there's going to be less and less to directly translate. For certain domains, as I mentioned before, you wouldn't probably need to do human post editing every single time, but it's not going to be in the same amounts that we had before, because Alfredo was mentioning the models are going to get better and better. How is it that the models are going to become better and better? Exactly what George was saying. And that's where we need this expertise to become something more strategic about where speed. That requires reskilling, of course. People are going to have to move from just direct translating to the previous. One area that I think is particularly important, where translators are really going to provide a difference, is terminology definition. And why I'm saying that is that, yes, AI can come up with the terminology, but it could hallucinate really badly. And it could create things that are not relevant to the market, that are not relevant to the language, or just leave it in English. And that's kind of the main point. I think that, we propose this in a shift left. Most of the tasks are going to be more like into fine-tuning. Most tasks are going to be into the preparation of making sure that those engines work well from the get-go. I think, and there is going to be a lot of work doing that. You have to tweak so many systems, including validation. You want to make sure that they can only work well if there is investment. There is also this thing with LSPs where there could be, okay, what am I going to offer? I mean, wouldn't the companies just hire directly the people who need to do that? So that's going to be kind of a thing that is going to go back and forth. I think that there is a great opportunity for LSPs, particularly in disambiguating what are the best models and fine-tuning models to use, and what's the offer that you're going to get. Yes, people want to probably simplify to as fewer as possible, like once we were discussing with Alfredo. I think was a great point during the talk too in Slug. And I think that it's going to be that back and forth. Now, I think that the LSPs have still this big opportunity to disambiguate that for companies and saying, this is what you should be using. And by the way, I can help you fine-tune the models and offer you fine-tune models for actually what you need. Because it's a complex task, and we are moving more into the having in internal companies what I keep calling orchestrators. So it's more like a content orchestration, and it's global content orchestration. Anything that you create, as we're saying, if you can generate things directly into any language, so you just need to bake it all in. So before we were talking about the need of having everything globalized from the get-go, is going to be particularly more important now.
Yeah. I tend to be a little bit more pessimistic, I think, than you guys in terms of how people will be using the technology, because it's in human nature to go through the path of least resistance. And once these tools are available and they enable people to achieve things, even if the quality may not be as good as you would get if you had someone involved, you pay for a company to review it. You have humans editing the text, but if it's good enough, people will use it. Like I think the bottom line is actually its cost. And quality is very important. I'm with you guys on that, but there will be a lot of pressure. Like, well, why are you still spending hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, depending on the company, in localization, if we already have these tools that can create or localize or translate text in pretty decent quality? So I would not be surprised. I hope I'm wrong. I don't think I am. I'm not surprised that companies we will go that route, and we will use the technology that way.
I'm going to make the counterpoint to that. I think it's a human characteristic to try to simplify things and to kind of try to spend as little money as possible. And when you don't know the details, it's very easy for you to simplify things. And for instance, I got my job at Microsoft because Microsoft realized that they couldn't just send one version for Portuguese, that they needed to have a different version for Portuguese from Brazil and Portuguese from Portugal, because the Portuguese market didn't accept a version that was Portuguese from Brazil, because the terminology was different, the style was different, the grammar was different, even if we officially are the same language. So what I think is going to happen is that companies are going to try to simplify things, kind of just send out a version that is generative AI without any local checks. And then they're either going to get blowback, or their market is not going to react positively to that. And then they're going to reassess, and this is going to take time, and it's going to be like some companies are doing it one way, other companies are doing another way. And then what they're going to realize is that the companies that are taking the time and doing something that is hyper local will be the ones that are more successful. I'll give another example. For the Spanish, we normally have one or two versions. Like we have either one Spanish version for localization, or we have one for Spain and one for Latin America. I think it will be much easier now and much more cost effective to have something that is hyper local. Like we can have a version for Peru, where Agustin is from. We can have a version for Chile, for Uruguay. All of those versions can coexist, and they can be very cost effectively created and maintained. But yes, people are going to try to simplify that, and that's something that we encounter a lot in localization, is that people they don't want to care about technical verification, linguistic verification. Oh, if this version is not English, it should be okay. How can I judge the quality of something that I don't speak? Like it's Spanish, so I don't know if the quality level. So I think it's going to be the market that is going to make these adjustments as companies try different approaches, and then they have to self-correct.
Yeah, I think that the market will. I agree with George from the perspective of yes, the market will determine that. I don't disagree necessarily with Alfredo in terms of the reduction of the volumes for those tasks. We know that the content is going to continue to grow. We know that the dollars are going to continue to come for language providers. I think that it's just a different revenue stream. And the other thing is like balancing quality with cost. It's going to be a constant juggling of these, and it's again part of the orchestration. And for that fact, a core project management skill that needs to be developed. And so what are the thresholds that I need to use? And the definition is a clear definition, an intentional definition of quality. How far do I want to give AI autonomy? And it has to be consciously decided as humans. How much confidence am I going to get based on my evaluations that I want to give autonomy to AI to perform these tasks, whatever they are? And with what thresholds of quality do I want to do that? And I think it's very important to get into that. It's like, because you need to judge many things. What kind of product, what type of feature, what type of content, what language? Because we know that, yes, LM is working really well for a bunch of languages, and it continues to get better for many. But there are still several languages for which I would not put my hands in or give that to. I think it's just managing those thresholds and understanding your markets and seeing all that. I think all that is going to be super important for this orchestration.
Yeah.
And I think Agustin raises a great point, and I think it's something that we need to reiterate, is that a lot of times when we're talking with product managers, they think of localization as kind of just being a process. And so whatever we do is going to be effective for all markets and all locales. And I think depending on what we are localizing and actually the market that we are going into, different approaches will be successful. It's the same with that we saw with machine translation. And it was a hard argument to make because it took a little bit of time until people got it. Is that it depends a lot on like what is the target market and what existing materials do you have that you can base your machine translation out of. And here with generative AI, I think it's going to be the same. What is effective, let's say, for the Netherlands might not be effective for Sweden. So you might have kind of this different matrix of models depending on what is your product and what market you are going to go into. And so I think for the industry, all the people that are working in localization, that's actually where you can get a lot of values to kind of simplifying all of that complexity and coming to the clients and showing them something that they can easily implement and, getting paid for those services.
Regardless of how companies will use the technology in the future, if they will abuse it or not, if they're going to want to spend more or not, the key thing is that AI enables companies to do things that they were not able to do before, to choose more language than in the past it would be very difficult to do or very costly to do. To do adaptations into different markets that before it would be very costly to do. To automate a lot of the work that you couldn't do before. And the key thing is actually, I think, going back to what Agustin mentioned, is defining what is the acceptable quality threshold for the things that you're releasing. And there will be different ones for the different types of different types of contents that you're doing it. And that's, I think that's where AI will also help. Like sometimes in the past, it was very difficult to manage exactly how much you localize in which language, in which markets. And like for big companies, sometimes we localized a lot of content. And and spend a lot of money doing that. And if you think about it, not that many people are looking at it. So, like, you might be able to better define, okay, where and you really need to pay attention to in having more humans involved in the process versus where things I'm going to rely on automated validation process through AI for certain language where I can add or remove at any time if needed. I think AI will help a lot in that space. So if you be wise in how we use it, you have more options. It is a little bit more complex, but you might be able to even use AI to help you drive those processes.
I think something that is I'm predicting is going to happen in the industry is that similar to like when you go to the supermarket and you can very clearly detect, where your avocados are coming from or where your chicken is coming from. And like, that's important to kind of have traceability and kind of like if there is an issue with, health or something like that, you can recall those products. Right now in our industry, sometimes we have a hard time understanding where certain translation is coming from, and kind of people get really specific about kind of purging their terminology and purging their translation memories, because there are certain terms or certain expressions that they need to eliminate, and they keep kind of reappearing through recycling. As we are using more and more generative AI, and we don't fully understand the process, and people are kind of just copying stuff that is around the internet and maybe not giving the right attribution, stuff like what the New York Times did, where they were putting an injunction on having their content being used to train generative AI. I think it's going to happen more and more. And so just as an example, if you go into a certain market and you have a new beverage, and then your information for marketing is very similar to Coca-Cola, and then Coca-Cola sues you, and then you have to understand, going back, so why did my campaign look very similar to Coca-Cola? And then you have to remove that. So there's still very complex issues in the industry that we need to figure out. And also, like, if you are asking generative AI to create a campaign for you or create your documents, what kind of information is then that model going to pass on, and what information can your competitors glean from the information that you put into it? So there's still a lot of really complex problems that the industry is going to have to work with, and depending on what products you are working on and how confidential and what is the level of regulation and which markets you are going into, it's not going to be as trivial as just going to ChatGPT and say, create a campaign for a new beverage that goes into the European market. It's not going to be as simple as that.
So
Right.
let me jump in for a second, because you guys have covered a lot of ground. First off, I want to say I can understand how you guys have maintained your friendship for so long, because even when you disagree, you do it in such a nice way, So that's awesome. But what I'm hearing is, there is a little contention between, the role of translators. I think that we could probably all agree that for certain content types, it's going to be more difficult to find good paying jobs as translators. And a simple example would be user generated content. You can call it low value, whatever you want to call it. It's or low risk content. The risk or the advantage of using AI far outweigh the risk. But when you talk about, I think Agustin mentioned, life sciences or medical devices, health related translations, maybe even financial services, things like that. The potential downside is so significant that you want those humans in the loop. I'm actually working I'm kind of advising on a project that's related to patent searches, using AI for patent searches. And guess what? You need the humans in the loop, because AI can do this amazing job. But at the end, that last mile, you need a deep subject matter expert to validate what the findings are. Okay. And so the challenge that this organization is building up the pool of subject matter experts. And now that pool of subject matter experts is able to monetize their skills in a wholly different way that they've done in the past, right? They've been publishing, but now they're hoping to validate. And so that's kind of related to what we're doing. The other thing that my other takeaway is that hyper-focus thing. I remember, when I was with CLS in Asia, and we would get these projects it'd be Mandarin or Cantonese. And we're like, oh, well, that's easy. And we're like, well, wait a minute, Mandarin for China or Mandarin for Singapore or Taiwan? Well, okay, people kind of get that. Cantonese, Hong Kong, Guangdong, it's the same. No, it's not. It is, but it's not. And that hyper focus, the ability for AI, for example, we had this project related to hotels. There's like 5 different ways to say hotels in China. And depending on the region, one term is much more predominant and has a certain nuanced meaning. It might mean this is like a friendly, kind of upscale place. This is like way above, and so you need to understand that. And that same term would be used differently in a different region. And you're literally talking like a couple hundred miles down the road, right? So, with using humans to kind of go through all that at scale, maybe difficult. AI maybe can jump in there and help with that hyper focus. Last point is that I think you kind of touched on was the underserved languages. There's a lot of discussion about, inclusion and especially when you talk about like healthcare issues during COVID, there were a lot of, languages in South America, in Africa, other parts of the world, they weren't getting the information at scale and at speed that the FIGS languages would get, for example. And AI maybe is not perfect, but it can help us get there, right? So I hope I kind of summarized what you said there. Let's move on, because I want to get this question, because Alfredo, I know that you've got a hard stop here in a bit. Let's just change tracks a bit. What is the job that is going to be in demand 2 years from now that people didn't hear of 2 years ago, or even a year ago, or maybe even today? And let's just go around. Give me a title, give me a job title, and maybe a little description of what the role is.
I'll start.
Okay.
A global content orchestrator.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So this person is going to be strategically creating this plan to be able to leverage content to the world on all languages at the same time, and particularly in starting with whatever is the main language for that particular company. And they need to go into all the details of defining the thresholds, the quality models, and everything like that. It's like an Uber kind of project manager role.
That's awesome. And then actually, I was thinking about that when you guys were talking about it. To me, I didn't have the name of the role, but I was thinking about like, you've got to be like a broad subject matter expert in terms of all these different tools, LLMs and AI, because AI goes beyond LLMs. And then you've got to be a subject matter expertise in terms of linguistic processes. And you probably should have an understanding of the actual languages themselves, so you can have an appreciation of the requirements that needed. To me, that sounds like a much more exciting role than a senior project manager, for example, even if it's at a global role, because you're not just handing it off to the tech team and saying, hey, put together a solution for me. You're actually helping to kind of architect that. Alfredo, George, what's your title?
I don't have a title, but I think one area where for many years we have trying to move away from, I think there will be, we're going to be investing much more is actually testing. And we might not call it testing, we might call it validation, we might call it something else. But I do think that the focus on is going to move more and more out of doing the work and more making sure that the work is correctly done, because AI will do a lot of the work itself. So, global validator, or whatever the name we want to give. I don't know exactly what it would be, but someone that actually think in terms of the strategic reasons. So how are we going to invest? How we guarantee that the quality is adequate for the different types of content that we generate for the different markets and language where we're going to be making this content available.
I'll call them localization marketing managers, because normally you have a localization team and you have a marketing team, and they don't talk too much, because the marketing team is focusing on kind of selling the product, and localization is focused on doing localization. And I think as we use more generative AI, the localization specific type tasks are going to be simpler, or they're going to be limited in scope, and so the marketing people will be able to accomplish those tasks more easily, and so they will be doing the validation that the materials are ready for that specific market, and maybe making edits and participating in terminology, and so I would call them localization marketing managers. And I think that's a role that is going to evolve. And like people can come into it from the localization side, or they can come in from the marketing side, but they will be responsible for doing the adaptation of the product into a different market.
Awesome. Okay, so we have 3 predictions. I don't know if you guys follow Polymarkets, but Polymarkets is a platform that allows people
I am aware of it.
people to bet on a variety of potential outcomes, elections, the economy, things like that. I think we should start a Polymarket thing for future local roles, and then we can place our bets. But I think we've got some really good predictions there. If you were designing a course, okay, because not everybody can go for global content orchestrator. I think you need to work your way up the food chain, or maybe get a master's degree or something, right? If you were going to design a course, because you guys do, but you want it to be purely focused on local roles for 2027, for example, okay, what would be the key elements of that course, and how do you ensure that what you're teaching in the course keeps up with what's going on in the real world?
I can go first because we're actually doing that right now. So I think something that is really crucial when you are seeing something that is changing is to understand what is going to change and what is going to stay the same, and to not overcorrect. Because like if you understand the basics, and let's give a profession, for instance, like as an accountant. Accountants still exist, but like the way that they did it 40 years ago, before they used Excel, or if you want to go back even further, before calculators, it changed, but kind of the basics of the job are still the same. So what we are doing is to kind of really focusing on the basics for people to understand what it is that they need to do, for instance, as a localization project manager, because that's kind of the focus of our course, because the certificate is divided between the intro, engineering, and so we deal more with the project management. So really understand what is the role of a project manager, what they need to get from the other stakeholders, what they can provide to other stakeholders, and kind of try to align to where the industry is going, but not overcorrect. Because I think the worst thing that we could do for the people that are coming through the certificate is to kind of give them the skills that we think that are going to be useful in 2027. And then the industry does a shift to somewhere, and like people just overcorrected, and now they have skills that are useless. And so by focusing on the fundamentals, then they can be ready for 2027, 2029, 2031, and the other changes that are going to come into the industry. Because it's very hard. I like a quote that people say in the industry that says, we normally overcast what we can change in 1 year, but we undercast what we can change in 10 years. So I think we probably are being too confident on what's going to change within 1 year, but we don't know what's going to happen in 10 years. Like we're in 2025, in 2015, we had no idea about the generative AI. So 2035, who knows? What's going to happen. But if you have the fundamentals, if you have the basics, then you can adjust to that.
Yeah, just to add to that, like as a PM, you still need to manage your time, you still need to manage your money, you still need to manage your contacts, have a communication plan, you still need to assess risk. So all these things are important. You may be leveraging AI to help you do that more effectively. And I think those are the things that we're literally discussing right now. Okay, how can we educate people to understand and learn those very important concepts? And by the way, if you're managing your time, potentially you can use ChatGPT or whatever generative AI model you would like to use to enable you to do these things. So some real life examples of how you could be using AI to make yourself more productive. or the things that you can automate that you couldn't automate in the past and things like that. Because I'll tell you, until I recently retired, I was using AI on my job every single day. And I retired, and I'm still using AI every single day for other things, for learning, so I'm using it. Now that I got used to it, I'm using it every day for several things, discussions, ideas, putting together, etc. So I think one of the key message and something that we will be stressing is that regardless of what you're doing in the industry, you should be using AI every day because it will make you more productive. It will help you achieve things that you couldn't in the past, and it will help you also to position yourself for a career in the future.
Right. And for that, adaptability is key. I think that for both things that George and Alfredo has said, you have to be constantly learning new things. So learn to learn. Concentrate on metacognitive skills. You need to learn how to learn and how to learn fast. And watch out for an article I'm publishing this week about how AI is impacting education.
That's awesome. And actually that was going to be my next question about, like actual characteristics or personal traits and, curiosity or always be learning. And, that's, so you already answered that. Let me ask the last question here then. For people who want to learn more about where we're going, what are the best resources? Obviously, you have courses like at the University of Washington, but like, what are your favorite resources and these things, places that you go and check in with on a regular basis?
I can go first. So to me, I get a lot of stuff through my LinkedIn feed, but I understand that can be customized. But I would make a plug for Multilingual and Nimdzi. I think they have a lot of really interesting articles and a lot of interesting speakers, and kind of from there, kind of find the thread that matches more with you, because from there you're going to get the breadth of information. But like, depending on where you are in the industry, if you are a PM, if you are like a computer scientist, if you are a linguist, more interested in quality, kind of find your niche and connect with other people. I think other avenues that I think are really super valuable is to participate in localization events. So, go to Lock World, go to events like Lock Lunch or Slug over here in Seattle, and kind of start talking to people, because I think those conversations are going to spark your interest. But like, don't try to focus on the industry as a whole, because there's a lot of breadth. Kind of find what interests you and kind of start to going more into that direction and connect with peers.
Awesome.
Agustin?
Yeah, sure. For me, it's a bit of what George says, is connect with others, reach out to others, network, talk to people about things, talk about your questions. You have good questions. There's never a bad question. Ask others, ask for opinions.
Yeah. How many times I've been in meetings where, like sometimes with VPs, where say, like 30 people and like very high level people, I'm the low guy. Sorry, I have a question. It might be a stupid one, but I have to ask because I think it's important. And people say, "Oh, that's a very good question." Sometimes they would say, "Oh, that's a stupid question." But really, yeah, there are no bad questions. I'm just joking here. Just to add to everything that was said, and I agree with everything. Once you have an idea of what you want to do, if you want to learn more specifically about those topics, go to AI, ChatGPT. Ask those questions. Can you help me? I'd like to learn more about these things. Can you give me some concepts? You'll be, if you haven't done that yet, you'll be amazed how it can help you find the resources, help you learn in a way that it's interactive, and it creates a conversation. So I really enjoy learning that way.
And be a skeptic. Don't just accept someone's opinion, or the first answer that you get from Chat GPT or whatever engine you are using. Go into depths to what is the source, why are people saying this, because then you will not only validate, but you will get more knowledge. I think in all aspects of life, there's a lot of danger when you kind of just get an answer that you don't fully understand, and then you start repeating it, and then you don't understand why you're saying that. So, like, really go into depth to understand what you are saying.
Cool. Gentlemen, as I said before, I actually have to leave. It was a pleasure to be here.
Well, I think this is a good time for us to kind of wind this down anyway. Alfredo, Agustin, and George, thank you guys so much for being on MemoQ Talks. If any of our listeners want to contact you, I'm sure they can get in touch via LinkedIn.
Yes.
There'll be short descriptions for all of you in the show notes. So again, thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed this, and maybe we can get you back in a few months and have kind of a follow-up conversation.
Anytime.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining MemoQ Talks, where we talked with industry leaders about their experiences and lessons learned to gain new insights about what works best across all areas of localization. Join us next time on MemoQ Talks.